Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Conflict Management Soul session. My name is Marissa, and I will be your speaker for this session. So today, obviously, we're going to be talking about conflict management and managing that conflict within your student organization. So we will hop right in. So just an overview about conflict management. Conflict is inevitable in any interpersonal relationship, and it can be a very positive experience if it's managed properly. Most people tend not to think that, and they think that it has to be very negative and very combative, but that's not the case. It's all in how it's handled. The ability to manage conflict is probably one of the most important social skills an individual can possess. This information is designed to help you acquire that skill. And there's no way to avoid it, but there are ways to effectively deal with conflict. So let's face the facts. It would be unnatural if everyone got along all the time. And so that's what we'll be talking about today, ways to help you manage those relationships that have conflict in them. So most people wonder, okay, I'm in a conflict with someone or with a group, so what do? First step, breathe and walk away. Attacking the situation when the moment is hot is an absolute no. There can be hurt feelings coming from that. You can split the membership in your organization when it comes to groups, and it can also hurt relationships. So when these conflicting, heated moments happen, the best thing you can possibly do is take that 10 seconds, breathe, and walk away from it, because you don't want to say something that you will regret later. And, we can't take back the words that we emit into the air. There can be underlying issues when it comes to conflict. Maybe someone feels left out. Maybe they feel that their voice isn't being heard. There are many things that can cause conflict for some people, and you never know how it will rear its head. But just be cognizant of that fact that there can be other things going on. And stepping away gives you that time to think about how to proceed, especially if someone is acting out of character for themselves. Take out that extra time to really think about, okay, what's the best way for me to address this? The next thing you want to consider and do is you want to attack the behavior that the person exhibits, not that person. Something generally is said or done that makes conflict arise very suddenly. And so in that situation, it's best that you be objective. Don't associate any feelings that you have towards the person or the situation to the situation that you have at hand. And when you have that conversation with that person or that group, you want to listen actively. And what is listening actively? Active listening is when you and this individual or you and this group, you sit down and you are listening to what it is that they're saying. A lot of times people tend to listen to speak. They don't listen to understand. So if someone else is speaking and they're talking about their feelings and how they were made to feel, don't listen to them just so you can tack on the next thing and say, oh, well, this is why this happened, and all of the other things that may be associated with it. Actually listen to what they're saying and respond thoughtfully. Be respectful in this situation. There shouldn't be any resorts to name calling or attacking personal character. That's unnecessary and honestly will aggravate the situation for you. And watch your tone and your language. I think that most of us know that it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. So watch your body language when you're speaking to these people. Watch your body language when just watch your body language at all times, because even though what you may be thinking may not be negative or hostile, sometimes it can be conveyed in the way that you carry or hold yourself or the way that you hold your conversation. So the next thing is you want to do is you want to use I statements as opposed to you statements. Using you statements can come off as aggressive. So in these situations, a lot of times, sometimes things are said to make a conflict arise suddenly. And you want to be careful about how you address the situation. So for example, if I tell someone, oh, well, you did this to me, you did this, that, and the other, it sounds as if I'm not taking responsibility for the part that I participated in with regard to the conflict. The better way to handle that is to say, I felt this way. I felt that you didn't take care of this. I felt that you weren't listening to me. Nobody can tell you that your own feelings are wrong. So the best way to operate in these situations is to use the I statements. as opposed to the you statements. Now, this doesn't always resolve situations, but it can keep your relationship civil. Now, the next thing we'll talk about are the approaches to managing conflict. So the first section I went through is really kind of how you want to navigate the situation in the onset of conflict, what to do in the heat of the moment. Now, these approaches that we're about to go over next will be things that will be tools that will help you manage conflict and conflicting relationships for a longer period of time. So our first approach is competing. Competing is when an individual pursues his or her own concerns at the other person's expense. This approach is very power-oriented, in which one uses whatever power that seems appropriate to win their own position. And competing might look like standing up for your rights, or defending a position which you believe to be correct, or simply trying to influence others. This is not the best way to handle conflict because it may come off to others as if you are not listening and you are only worried about yourself and your own concerns and your own agenda. And that is not the way to mediate or resolve conflict. So this may not be the best approach to use. Our second approach is accommodating. It's the very opposite of competing. So when someone is being accommodating in a conflict, that individual neglects his or her own concerns to satisfy the concerns of the other person. And there is an element of self-sacrifice in this mode. Accommodating can take the form of selfless generosity or charity, obeying another person's order when one would prefer not to, or yielding to another person's point of view. Now, with this approach, again, it can get things done in a sense, but at the same time, this is a kind of a win-lose situation right here with this approach, because one person is going to gain everything from it, but someone is going to lose a lot. And when it comes to conflict, while most people try to be as peaceable as possible, at the end of the day, your concerns should still be heard. Never should you concede all of what you're concerned about and what you feel was neglected towards you. You should never concede all of that. Managing conflict is about finding an approach or finding a solution that appeases all parties involved. Our next approach is avoiding, and this is when an individual does not immediately pursue his or her own concerns or those of the other person if he or she does not address the conflict. Avoiding can take the form of diplomatically sidestepping issues, postponing issues until a better time, or simply withdrawing from a threatening situation. The avoiding technique tends to be seen in those who do not like conflict for whatever reason. Some people just prefer not to rock the boat. Some people don't want to be involved in it, and it just flat out scares some people. Now, in this case, avoiding really isn't one of the better techniques, strictly because when you don't address things or conflict in a timely manner, a lot of times issues can tend to fester, which if they sit long enough and someone thinks about it long enough and stays offended long enough, so down the road, a situation that's really not conflict worthy will cause old feelings, old issues to arise, and then it will be worse. It's a snowball effect. So to avoid conflict, while it may seem like a great idea at the time, in the long run, it's not something that you're going to want to do, because this is something that will cause a major rift between people, in groups, and in relationships. And if you're one of those people who find yourself avoiding conflict a lot just because you're afraid of it or you don't necessarily know how to navigate it, take out the time to really think about what about it scares you so much, and be able to start working through those issues, because as I said earlier in the presentation, conflict is inevitable, and the best thing for you to do if you are afraid of it is to know how to navigate it and know that it doesn't have to be a negative experience. The next technique we're going to talk about will be compromising. The objective is to find some expedient, mutually acceptable solution which partially satisfies both parties. This falls on the middle ground between competing and accommodating. Compromising gives up more than competing, but less than accommodating. Likewise, it addresses an issue more directly than avoiding, but still doesn't explore it in as much depth as you need to, or as much in depth as collaborating, which is the next technique that we'll talk about. Compromising might mean splitting the difference, exchanging concessions, or seeking a quick middle ground position. Many times with compromise, we will still give up things that we may not necessarily want to. While this is one of the better techniques, this is one that you choose to employ, just remember that your needs shouldn't be ignored. They shouldn't be overlooked. So be honest with yourself if this is going to be one of the techniques that you use. And our last technique that we'll talk about is collaborating. This is the opposite of avoiding. Collaborating involves an attempt to work with the other person to find some solution which fully satisfies the concerns of both parties. It means digging into an issue to identify the underlying concerns of the two individuals and to find a solution which meets both sets of concerns. So as I was talking about earlier, sometimes with conflict, there are underlying issues that cause conflict to arise, and you may not know what it is, but when you collaborate with other people or with other groups, it gives you the opportunity to really sit down and get down to the meat of what the issue is. It could be something that you don't know about at all. It could be something that you have done or said that maybe you didn't mean anything by it, but maybe someone else took it the wrong way. It's that whole intent versus impact situation. And so collaborating really is one of the best ways, the most effective approach of conflict management, because it gives you the opportunity to really sit down and really get down to the nitty-gritty of whatever the issue is. So collaborating will produce the following results. Both sides' needs will be met. There will be a sense of satisfaction for both parties, or all parties if there's more than two. There will be mutual respect. Both or all parties will feel enriched rather than belittled, and you can continue the effort of both parties to work together in the future. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the collaborating approach since it's the most effective way. This is the one that we would like to see you use. So step 1 to the collaborating approach. How to use this approach. This is a win-win negotiation to deal with conflicts in your organization. Number 1, diagnosis. You need to determine the nature of the conflict. Is it a value conflict? What really is the issue? It's extremely difficult to negotiate when the conflict is regarding personal values, because that's not something that really can be argued. What I value personally may not be what the next person values personally, and that's okay. For the example given, it says that there can be a dispute over whether alcohol should be prohibited at a fundraising dance. You may have some people in an organization that feel that alcohol shouldn't be present just because of the risk factors involved and how people can act with alcohol present. You may have others who feel that it could add to the party/social atmosphere, and those are fundamentally value conflicts, and you can't necessarily argue that. Maybe the issue is a difference of expectations of each other. Understanding the type of conflict that lies in the fact that each of us have different expectations, and they grow out of our experiences with the organization. And when we interact with others whose expectations have grown out of their own unique experiences with the organization, conflict can arise. So maybe if someone has had a negative experience with your organization, but maybe someone else has had a positive, and they come together, and their expectations are totally different. They're operating in different thoughts, in different processes. So regardless, you always have to be aware of what your expectations are of yourself, of other people in the organization, organization to organization. You have to be aware of the expectations. You have to know, and you function from there, because sometimes, actually a lot of the times, conflict arises from miscommunications and misunderstandings. The second step to the collaborating approach is initiation. This is the most effective way to confront another in a conflict situation, is to state the tangible effect the conflict has on you. So the example given is that we have a concern in our committee. Although your position on keeping a low budget for the officer training retreat is understandable, it restricts us from having the retreat off campus, which is the desire of most members. So obviously this would be a conversation held between members of a committee, as stated, obviously a financial officer and someone else. And so the best way to confront the conflicting situation is to go to that person and address the situation in a non-hostile manner. So this conversation could have gone several ways. It could have been very negative, but as given in the example, it was approached in a very peaceable manner. When you initiate the conversations about conflicts, you don't have to be hostile. You should never be hostile, because hostility will not get the response that you want and or need. So when it comes to addressing conflict, just always come with the facts, and don't bring any other feelings, issues, topics into it. The third step to the collaborating approach is active listening, which is something we mentioned earlier, where negotiators must be capable of hearing the other's point of view. While listening, don't think about what to reply in order to persuade. Argument-provoking replies should be avoided. And active listening involves paraphrasing or restating what the other says. Idea or content should be considered as well as feeling. So as I was saying earlier, with active listening, when you're engaged in those conversations with people, it's okay to kind of parrot what they say. So when someone tells you how they're feeling, when it's an appropriate time for you to respond, you can easily say, okay, well, what I heard was that you are feeling X, Y, and Z. And then you can continue your conversation from there. A lot of times with listening, people tend to think that just because you heard what they said, you're listening. That's wrong. You can hear what somebody says, but just because they're speaking and you heard them, that doesn't mean that you're listening. Because if you're not listening to understand and you're just listening to reply, you're not actually hearing what they have to say. So when you're having these conversations, just remember that you want to listen actively. Think if the shoe was on the other foot. If you were speaking to someone and it was a conflicting situation, you want to be heard as well. So you want to treat others with the same type of respect that you would want. Step 4 to our collaborating approach is problem solving. Clarify the problem. After the above steps, each party should have a clear idea about what is the tangible issue. I think that problem solving is neglected quite a bit in conflict management. Many people tend to be able to identify problems, but they don't come with solutions. And that's the key. If you have problems, you can't just stop there. You have to be thinking, okay, well, here's my problem, but what's the solution I can come up with? Be a problem solver. So talk about what's needed and wanted, and be clear on the facts and the information. Generate a list of possible solutions. While doing this, let go of solutions that you thought you had. Be creative. The best negotiator makes the other side feel good. And start by thinking, how can I make the other side happy? Decide together on the best solution acceptable to all parties, and use consensus decision-making skills. Don't try to persuade or coerce. Then finally, plan the implementation of the solution. Make assignments of who, the what, where, when, and how. Plan an evaluation or review of the solution after a specified period of time. Just an overview. All 5 styles of conflict management obviously have advantages and disadvantages. When dealing with conflict in personal relationships, any of these types may be useful in certain situations. The last style, collaboration, however, is highly recommended for dealing with conflict in student organizations. We're going to run through a few additional tips to help you with conflict management. And the first one we have is the issues that you might have to deal with when confronting a conflict. People who will not negotiate. So some people refuse to negotiate because they want to protect their special interests or privileges. And here are a few steps that you can take in dealing with that. Start to negotiate anyway. Get the spirit of negotiation going. A lot of times people can succumb to the peer pressure. So if you start to negotiate and you're in that spirit of getting along and let's make this amicable, a lot of times people will fall in with that. If not, explain. The next thing you want to do is explain why it's in their interest to negotiate, why it's worthwhile to deal with the problems existing between you and that person, or between you, your group, or your group and another group. Talk about problems and how the collaboration will help them solve those problems or others. Share the issue. For example, bring it to their attention that the joint image that your two subgroups for the organization. Negotiation is one of the major keys in life. There will always be some type of conflict, whether it's small or large, and you have to be able to come together, two parties, multiple parties, however many parties are involved, and be able to come to an agreed and shared upon decision so that everyone can function cohesively. The next issue, when trust is the problem. Here are a few suggestions for that. Number one, just be trustworthy. Do what you said you would do. Always stay true to your word. That's one thing that you definitely have, is your word. And if you give people your word, if you say that you're going to do something, if you say that you're going to do something in a timely manner, if you say that you're going to help another organization put an event on, do it. Be about it. Number two, find a higher value that you both agree on. For example, you both want to project a positive image. So with conflict, a lot of times I think it comes from the details, and we all know that the devil is in the details. But at the end of the day, there should be one common shared goal that everyone has. And if there are conflicts that come from other areas, at the end of the day, everyone should be able to come back together and say that having a positive image, that's our goal. So let's bypass the dramatics, and let's do what we have to do to make this happen. Number three, you need to listen. As I mentioned several times previously in the presentation, listen, and listen actively and listen often. You learn more things when you listen, and again, as I said before, it's always about active listening. So don't listen to reply, listen to understand, because when you understand where people are coming from, it can give you different viewpoints, and maybe it sheds light upon an action or a statement that you made that may not have been taken in the best way. Number four, make an agreement in such a way that you know when it's carried out. So put timelines on things. Just know that things are going to be done in a certain way at a certain time. Start small. Especially if trust is an issue, you can't start off with big things or big events and promise people that, oh, hey, I'm going to do this event for you, we're going to do it with you, if in the past you didn't come through. Start smaller. Maybe if you would like to sponsor something for somebody, or give them supplies, or help them create something when it comes to student organizations. Start small and work your way up. Number six, overall, there are just going to be people who simply can't and will not trust you, but you do your best with that situation anyway. More tips. No social network venting. Our generation, the millennials, tend to love to do this, and we are probably the biggest perpetrators of this one right here. Between Facebook, Twitter, and other social networking websites, we're all connected in some way, whether it's mutual friends or our profile is public for the world to see. When you turn to social media to vent your frustration about a person or a situation, it can get around very quickly. People tend to treat Facebook, especially Twitter, even Snapchat, as their personal diary. And while it may be entertaining for you, or it helps you get some feelings out, and it may be entertaining to other people as well, someone, and it's going to be the person that you didn't want, will find out, and you can lose a lot behind social network venting. You can lose your job, you can lose your image. There's just a lot to be lost on social network venting, and it's just not something to do. It's just not a decision that you want to make, because the outcome will not be positive. Remember that there's always a time and place to address conflict. Having a screaming match in front of other members, students, university professionals, in an open hallway, or any open public space for that matter, is neither the time nor the place. If you think that the conversation you're going to have is going to get loud, and it shouldn't, you should always try to de-escalate situations like that. But in the event that it does, you and the other individual should be alone. You may ask to speak with the person or the other people in a private setting, as I said before. And if the situation cannot be worked out properly, know when to involve a third party, someone to mediate. It might be that someone else needs to help mediate that situation. If you have any questions about today's conflict management presentation, please feel free to email myself, Marissa Hill, mdhill2 at central.uh.edu, or you can also talk to Janelle King, jsking8 at uh.edu.